from Kansas is recognized.
Mr. President, thank you. 2 weeks ago, I stood in this same position and gave remarks to my colleagues about the importance of, even though we can't do everything, could we do something? And it seems to be too often that in the way the Senate has operated is that unless we can do everything that everyone wants, we do nothing. And I encouraged us to try to figure out what it is we can agree on and address that legislatively and save the issues that we don't agree on for later. And the challenge that I presented was the circumstance of the consequences of COVID-19, the difficulties that Americans, Kansans are facing, and the importance of us completing our work in regard to an additional response to try to help the economy and to make sure people are healthy and know that they're healthy. We seem to be making progress in regard to that desire to address the needs of Americans. And so while my complaint or concern 2 weeks ago was we don't have to do everything, we can do something, it appears that we're going to do something which is really important. Now I would raise the issue of timing. It's very discouraging me to return to Washington, D.C. to learn that the continuing resolution which expires on Friday is to be extended until next Friday at a time in which Americans have little ability to wait, at least to know what they're going to be able to expect. Small businesses, individuals, employees, employers, all need the certainty. And every day that we are unable to accomplish what we can agree on is another day in which those Americans, those workers, those business owners don't know what they face. Christmas ought to be a time, the holiday season ought to be a time for expectations and joy and comfort. And yet what we are doing here by this continued delay is creating uncertainty, which creates great challenges. The mental health and well-being of Kansans and Americans is at stake here. And again, my guess is that whatever we could agree on next week, we could agree on this week. And so I would encourage my colleagues and me to redouble our efforts, not only to do what we can do, but to do it in a timely enough fashion that people get the benefit. I think of those who work in hospitals in Kansas, those who care for people who are suffering from the symptoms of COVID. We need to make certain that we provide them the necessary personal protection equipment, that we need to have the necessary testing, that every hospital, every clinic, every doctor has the resources necessary to care for those who are ill today. That's something that can't wait. And when it comes to the economy, too many businesses, retail establishments, motels, restaurants, venues, theaters, the uncertainty that we're creating that every day goes by in which they don't know whether Congress is going to respond to their needs is a day in which we may lose another business. We may lose another person's employment. And so the request is that we move more quickly than what we have done to date, now that we seem to be zeroing in on a compromise agreement, a bipartisan agreement. That's a piece of good news, but every day that we delay the outcome, the vote, the support the American people, Kansans, need is a day in which more harm is done. It is a time in which uncertainty exists, and while we continue to have our debates and discussions, that uncertainty is creating not only economic problems, but potentially loss of life as well. This place is slow to respond, and I would encourage us to be quicker in our response than what we have been to date. People are struggling, and they need our help. Mr. President, I also would say that too many Kansans have died, people that I know. They've died from COVID. This is a very damaging disease. I would encourage Kansans and Americans to do the personally responsible things and protect themselves, to wear the mask, to socially distance, we do not and cannot afford another shutdown. Every day that goes by in which we're not providing the opportunities for businesses to stay open and employees to be employed, particularly in rural America, the places, Mr. President, that you and I come from, we lose a business to COVID, that business is unlikely to return. If we don't provide the necessary support for our hospitals and healthcare delivery system, there isn't a hospital in Kansas, if it closes its doors today because of COVID, is going to open tomorrow when COVID is behind us. And the deaths that I mentioned in many instances have been the community leaders, the people who have made a difference in communities across Kansas. And every life has value, every life has meaning. We want this death to end, and for purposes of our economy and purposes of life and death, it's time for the United States Senate to act. Not another week delay, not another 2 weeks of unknowing, but let's reach our conclusion, let's come together and find solutions and provide hope to my constituents in Kansas, yours in Arkansas, and the people of America. Mr. President, I yield the floor.